Hi everyone, welcome back. This is March's episode of PodTC. I know that we're a little late on this, and that is partially, definitely my fault, not partially. So I apologize for that, but we are back with another installment. Today I am joined by Cathy Moore. She is the coordinator of Transfer Partnerships, Articulation, and Prior Learning at Miami University. How are you doing today, Cathy?
I am doing great. Happy Eclipse Day, such a special day. Everything is sunny and looking forward to it. Glad
Yeah.
to be here.
Yeah, we are recording this on the morning of the solar eclipse, so both of us are excited for this to come through and, hopefully it's not too crazy outside, but neither of us are doing anything too big for it. We're just going to enjoy it at our local residences since we are able to do that here in Ohio today. So it is a nice day out so far. We're hoping in Northeast Ohio for a lack of cloud coverage, which I would never hold my breath in Northeast Ohio to not have clouds. So,
Anywhere. I
yeah.
mean, it's good right now, but 5 minutes from now we could have a rainstorm. Who knows?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So, today we're going to talk about something pretty unique that you guys do. We'll get into that a little bit here in a bit, but first, I would love for you to be able to share a little bit about yourself with the membership. So, could you let us know kind of? I already spoiled like where you work, but maybe where you went to school or anything else personally that you would want to share?
Yeah, so I have got such a weird journey educationally. I was a transfer student myself and a reverse transfer student. So I
Ooh.
started off at very traditional Western Illinois University right out of high school, and then got married and didn't quite finish my degree at Western, moved to Florida, got a bachelor's degree from University of West Florida, and then transferred some credits back to Western Illinois to complete my degree at Western Illinois. So then I ended up with 2 degrees. Um, then we moved to Italy. I was married to someone in the Air Force, and we moved to Italy in the northern area of Italy. And that's where I pursued my master's through University of Oklahoma. And they offered 2 programs over there. You could either do an MBA, and I thought, gross, I don't want to do that at all, or this higher education degree. And I thought, oh, well, I want to do something. So I guess I'll do this higher education. I don't even know what it means. And I just fell in love with it. It was so great. And so I completed that master's degree. Then I went on and got a PhD in human services. And well, I should clarify, I've all but my dissertation. I never finished my dissertation for that PhD, but I still loved all the coursework, and I still do schooling to this day. Actually, I just got accepted to the University of North Georgia's postmaster's certificate program in
Yeah,
transfer.
very
I'm
cool.
super excited about that. So I'm definitely one of those lifelong learner people. So when people ask about my education, it's like it's just all over the place, but it's been so great.
Yeah. Well, that unique perspective is also nice, especially like I was not a transfer student. You were a transfer student, and you even did reverse transfer, which is a nice other little flavor that you sprinkled on top of that. A lot of us have done, graduate school in some regard. We all kind of take different paths, but it's funny how we all kind of ended up here. And you even had the international experience on top of all of that. That had to be super cool to live that life and hopefully is northern Italy. They're both known regionally like northern and southern for like their different food, types. Yeah.
Completely different kind of places. So we were a
Hmm.
little bit north of Venice, completely different from southern Italy, all of it. The people, the food, the everything about it.
Yeah.
Uh, Loved it. It was such a great experience. It
Yeah.
was wonderful 4 years over there.
Very cool. Yeah, that's so interesting to hear. And it's so nice to always learn about people on this podcast and kind of the cool things and how we all kind of ended up in this shared field here in Ohio, but we all had the very traditional transfer student to grad school to here to, maybe you were an RA to literally you lived in Italy, you lived in Florida, you lived in, you started school in Western Illinois, all of this stuff. So you checked off a lot of boxes.
Yeah, and really, when I very first started working with transfer students, when I lived in Italy, my job, because of I got tuition assistance if I worked for the Military Educational Services Office.
Okay.
And I worked with military members who also were trying to figure out how to best use their credits from who knows where, from
Yeah.
who knows what. How do we put them together to make a degree? How do we finish this degree from this place? How do I transfer my credits moving there? So that's really when I started working with, we didn't really call them transfer students at the time. They were
Sure.
just military students. But that is really what they were, is really
Hmm.
students who were coming with so many different experiences and trying to figure out how do we put those together and get that degree, that credential, and whatever that looked like. So that's really when I started working in transfer. And then when I got back to the States, I worked in career services for a
Hmm.
lot of years. And yeah, just my path found its way back to transfer. But I've always loved that puzzle of, I
Yeah.
look at it really like a puzzle, that puzzle of really kind of trying to figure out how can we best help those people reach those goals, whether it's from this school or that school or military training or
Sure.
whatever that looks like. So it was
Yeah.
fun.
Which is very much, even if it's not coded as quote unquote a transfer student, I mean, we obviously military students, like Jared was on the podcast a few months ago and gave us a lowdown on some of the things that like they've been working on. But obviously, these students might not be the most traditional of transfer students, but they're still transferring credit. Much like our CCP crowd within, they might be a new freshman, first year student, whatever your institution calls them coming in, but, as many, I mean, at Kent State, in the last few years, it's been, I want to say over 60% of our incoming classes have had some sort of college credit already completed, AP, CCP, whatever. But it's not only transfer students where these skills are applicable. So it does, we were joking a little bit about your very long title. But it does, you're the coordinator of transfer partnerships, articulation, and prior learning. It sounds like that experience in Italy and even career service and everything kind of led you to exactly where you are now.
It does. I mean, I look at my first bachelor's degree, the reverse transfer was in journalism. And then I have one in
Hmm.
psychology. Then I have one in higher ed, and then human services. And, my mom is always like, oh my gosh, all this education. And yes, I have student loans and all of these things, but it really does all fit together. I mean,
Yeah,
I could give you probably a whole dissertation about how all of those fit together and really educate the way I do my work all the time. And so it's great to see that and those experiences, those learning opportunities have really, really helped me get to where I am today, I
yeah.
think. So it's great.
So speaking of where you've been today, obviously there's three major pieces to your title. Could you kind of go over maybe briefly, because I'm sure we could all talk about our jobs all day and what we all do, but kind of like the inception of your job and why you were hired and such. Like, could you give us a quick overview of like what you work on in a more or less day-to-day basis?
Yeah, sure. So, my job changed a little. So there was another person in a similar role to mine. And then
Okay.
when she left, they kind of modified the position a little bit to include a little bit broader scope. So
Okay.
I do work with transfer partnerships. So that is really trying to build new partnerships with community colleges, with tech prep schools, with whoever that might be to help us figure out where we can set up pathways for students and make that a more easier process. And then I also work on all of our articulation agreements. So whether that's a course by course kind of thing or a whole 2+2 pathway or any of those kinds of things, I work with Carolyn Haynes, who is our wonderful associate provost, who does all kinds of wonderful transfer initiatives in any of the state, like the OT36 and the OGTPs and all of those kinds of things. I help her with all of that work. And then prior learning is something that was more recently added. We're really trying to do a better job of figuring out how we can honor people's experience. So we know that learning happens outside the classroom and it looks different for different people. So how can we really look to honor that? So I created a class that helps students create portfolios to earn prior learning credit. And this might not seem like a big thing or a new thing for other institutions, but it's a pretty new thing for Miami, especially the Oxford side of things. My job kind of crosses over both the Oxford campus and the regional campus. Very different cultures, I guess you could say, on both of
Yeah.
those. Um, and it's been so great because I think one of the things that's really helped me do my job is I've been at Miami for 14 years. And I have worked in many different places, career services, advising, the regionals, Oxford, all over the place. And so I've made a lot of connections
Yeah.
internal to Miami and external. And I really think that's what has helped me so far do my job and do some of the things that we've tried to do. Because I've established those relationships. So it's been May 8th, actually, my son's birthday. May 8th will be 1 year. And I feel like we've accomplished so much in that year. So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. Well, part of what you guys obviously have, I don't know, did we can get right into the transfer collaborative group then. Was that something that was started here while you were in this role at Miami, or did that kind of predate you?
It predated me, but
Okay.
when I was in the regionals, so I was in a similar role at the regionals about 5 years ago, and we had a similar group, like a partnership group.
Okay.
Then that kind of morphed a little bit and changed a little bit. And a couple of years ago, really Carolyn Haynes brought this idea of this transfer collaborative together. And it's really developed over the last, I would say, 1 to 2 years, as far as especially the people who participate and the
Okay.
things that we do in that. Um, so yeah, it's not something that I created, but it's so important, so valuable. I think it's one of the most key components of what we're trying to do for transfer. So
Nice.
I love that we've kept it going. I think there for a little bit when we were going through some transitions, there was a little lull where it was like, okay, what's happening here? And now we've really got it back up to like full speed and everybody's engaged and we're making some changes and it's been really great.
Yeah, that's nice to hear. Obviously, the ebbs and flows and of higher education can kind of, who owns the group and who, is tasked really with the completion of these tasks and things. So, we'll get into a little bit of that, but I'm sure you know a little bit about the history and stuff. So why don't we start kind of with the basics of what the Transfer Collaborative Group at Miami is? Was there like a specific charge or someone who kind of mandated stuff like this, or do you know if it kind of was created out of a necessity of something, or just, hey, we need this group because we think it would be a nice touch for our transfer students? Like, could you kind of elaborate on that?
I think when it really started, when it was had a different name, the partnerships group a long time ago that I was a part of, we found that there was a lot of overlap of efforts, right? So
Hmm.
the Department of Education could be working on this great partnership with, I don't know, our Butler Tech career tech school. And then we find out that another department is doing the same thing. And things were starting to overlap and really lost efficiency. And so we would have these meetings once a month. I think they were about once a month to kind of talk about what are we doing? How can we leverage what each other is doing to make those partnerships more efficient, more effective, so that we're not doing extra work. And then what came out of that, we also noticed was that we would start to have conversations about, oh, you're struggling with this. Well, we struggle with that too. And then we could have these kind of brainstorming sessions about how can we attack that issue and having different perspectives. A long time ago when I was on that group, there were associate deans from different departments, there were people from the registrar's office, the admissions office, similar to what it is today. And so you got a great diversity of perspectives and we were
Yeah.
able to really work on that. And so, like I said, I think that kind of fell off for a little while, especially around COVID, kind of COVID ruined everything.
Sure
And
did.
sure did. And so after that, we had to kind of think about how are we going to revive that? And again, I just can't say enough wonderful things about Carolyn Haynes. She is such a strong transfer champion. She really, really works so hard, especially on those state initiatives. Like there's nobody better in getting our OT 36s submitted and all of those things. And And so she really worked to revive this and brought me on as co-chair of the committee. And so that's kind of how it's developed. And I think we've got such a great group. Again, we've got some faculty members. Some we've got a couple of assistant deans from like our Department of Education. We've got people from the registrar's office, admissions. We've got Amanda, like people from enrollment management and student success kind of lenses. So we've got we've got advising people on there, Gina from admissions, so people who are actually going out there and recruiting
Mm-hmm.
students. So we've got some really great diversity of perspectives. And I think that's what makes this such a powerful tool for people who are working in transfer.
Nice.
It's such, I hate to be cliche to say it takes a village, but what you really have to have those different perspectives if you're going to work with transfer students. It's not an easy one-way kind of tunnel. There's so many
Sure.
kind of different branches, and it's really important to get all of those perspectives.
Yeah. So is when we talk about groups, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, but is Caroline, is she the one who technically, like, I don't know if heads the group is the right way to say that, but so it has like a one person who kind of leads the group, and then is it something that the group kind of comes forth and through discussions kind of figure out like kind of what the next tasks are? Is Caroline assigning tasks to different individuals? Like kind of how does that work?
Yeah, so we're co-chairs, so we both kind of head it.
Okay.
Um, and we come up with an agenda each
Hmm.
month when we meet that does kind of come out of what did we talk about before? We've created a transfer goals. We've created our goals. We've created a kind of a action plans.
Hmm.
We've also looked at policies. So what happens is we get together as a group and then usually something comes up. So an advisor might say, we're really finding this to be challenging working with transfer students. And so then we say, okay, how can we address that problem? And we have done so many great things about coming from that. We find out, let's say this XYZ is a problem. So then we say, whether it's me, whether it's Carolyn, whether it's the registrar's office, whether it's all of us, whoever plays a part in that. And we say, how can we fix this? How can we change this? How can we change this policy? We've changed policies in terms of how we approve classes for transferology or how we process petitions for our gen ed requirements, or, all of these different things have come out of understanding better each of the roles these different people play in the transfer process. So we kind of go through those. Each time we give updates on what are the new OT 36 approvals, what are the new OGTP approvals or things in progress, what new 2+2 pathways or partnerships have I worked on. If there's any events, anything like that. We might talk about technology. What kinds of technology ideas do people have? So we really let the group kind of dictate what the discussion will be and then use that to then make the next one. And so then when we solve one problem, there's always another, I don't want to say problem, but always another challenge that comes up that we can then put our heads together and work on. And I really love that because it is an action meeting. It is an action group. It's not just we talk about this and think, well, that's great. We actually have action items and we follow up on those, and we do it and we make changes and we make a difference, I think, in what we're trying to do with transfer students. It's fantastic.
Well, and it also helps, because I was going to ask more or less like who picks a group and what's the rationale, but I think that I have a better follow-up question, since you kind of already answered that. So it always helps having someone with, I hate to just call it like power of title or, someone with a high up title in the group that has influence on institutional policy decisions, all of that. So that's a huge help, I'm sure, to you guys to have that. And that's probably partly the reason why things start to happen when you guys start talking about them in meetings and people are able to not like grievances, but they're able to say like, hey, this process is inefficient. How can we clean it up? As opposed to, it's a problem, and then we can talk about it, and then nothing actually end up happening because of it. Venting is important. People need to get, it off of their chest, but how do we turn that into production after, the vent is over, or however you need to call it? So, I guess more or less, I think what a follow-up question I would have is that you say that it takes a village. A village can be comprised of 5 people. It can be comprised of a bunch of people. And then there's also kind of more or less like the conflicting viewpoints of somewhere, like a working group can't be more than maybe a handful of people. So how do you kind of balance, a lot of unique perspectives in a room are, nice anytime that something specialized happens and you're more or less like, who can we talk to about this? And then the advisor for X program raises their hand and says, this is exactly what happens on a day-to-day basis. That is invaluable. But also with a lot of voices in the room, we all know how, democracy works and all of that. It can be very slow to make some changes. So like, you don't have to be exact, but how many people-ish do you think are in the group? And do you think it's always a net benefit to have that many voices in the room? Or do you think it slows things down a little bit? What do you think on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's probably about 10 to 12 people actually in the collaborative.
Okay.
Maybe they don't all come every meeting. And I think we could probably have more, right? Like sometimes I think I'll tell you one thing I really wish we had is a student voice. I wish
Okay.
we had,
Yeah.
we don't have that. Um, but I don't find that it really ties things up because like we might say, oh, we really need to change the way we do this. And the registrar then can jump in and say, well, I understand that would be easier, but let me tell you why we can't do that. And then it
Sure.
helps us understand a little bit better,
Hmm.
right? Then it's not a matter of they're not trying to be a roadblock. It's a matter of this is how this process works. And when I don't know how the registrar's office process works, I've never worked in the registrar's office. So having that knowledge is really, really valuable.
Of course.
Um, Same thing with, the admissions. I think it's because of the way our campus is set up, and you can kind of relate to this, how Oxford does certain things in terms of admission
Yeah.
advise is different than the way the regionals do. And so we couldn't have a group like this without having voices from both of those sides. And
Yep.
so because of that, the group has to get a little bit bigger, right? I wish we had also not only more student involvement, I wish we had more faculty involvement from Oxford. We have a great faculty member on the group from the regional side. She's such a strong transfer champion in every sense of the word. She used to be in our English studies, which is really her area. Now she's the interim chair of our criminal justice program. And she's just always so willing to make new partnerships, be flexible for transfer students, think about it from different perspectives. I wish we had somebody from Oxford that would be more of a champion in that way. But again, just like you're saying, we could have so many people that we would just get too big.
Yeah.
Um, and Carolyn is that, I would say, that power that goes behind. She works in the provost office. Obviously, she's associate provost. She's been at the university for a long time. So it when we need something to get done, she's very, very good at doing that. Um, but I don't feel like, I mean, this is my perspective, but when I see our meetings, I don't feel like people aren't heard. I feel like we can still hear everybody's voice. I don't think that the group is too big where people aren't hearing each other. And there really hasn't seemed to be conflict, like people disagreeing per se. It's been more of a understanding why things are as they are, or why they need to change, or what that might look like. So you're right, though. It's such a delicate balance because you know we could probably have 100 people on the group, but then it probably is going to be a lot of talking and venting and the less doing and
Yeah.
taking action.
I agree with you. And honestly, when you were first talking about a village, I was thinking well over 12 people. So I don't
Yeah.
think 12 is crazy at all. At Kent, we call it the transfer enrollment group. I head it, and it is depending on the meeting, anywhere from like 6 to maybe max 10 people. And I feel like if we got a lot bigger than that, and really we're not even, we don't talk about, it's mostly the enrollment side. Like we used to be more, but we're still in like different offices. So our transfer credit peeps are in the registrar's office, and enrollment management kind of houses the recruitment and the orientation staff. And then we have our partnerships person, so probably our Cathy, in this case, Amy, she's awesome, but she is in curriculum. So it's like technically we're all, a lot of us work in the same building, or enrollment people are out on the road and stuff, which also makes it tough to meet sometimes. But um it's a great way for us to just kind of keep on being in the know with everything, and being as a, and I know you were talking about your enrollment management people earlier, but being someone who is so front facing, student facing, sometimes just knowing that, hey, this process cannot change for a student, that is a lot of ammo for me when I'm talking to the student, and just to say, hey, our system doesn't allow that, but I'm going to take extra care of this for you and help walk you through it as I kind of understand more of the nuance of why we can't streamline this process or something like that. So I think that is important for a couple reasons. And sometimes just talking is great, but obviously changing policy and procedures and all of that is really a huge benefit to you guys. And I wish, and maybe in a later iteration, like we have 8 campuses, so, and it's tough, which I know that you guys obviously have a few campuses, and sometimes it is tough, and virtual meetings and stuff obviously have helped bridge that gap some, but there's still a physical distance between all of us, which we can do a podcast from a 4-hour drive apart, but sometimes when it's people at our own institutions, we get so mucked up in our own day to day that it's hard to keep everyone in the loop about what you're doing and stuff. So I think that.
My boss, Amanda, she sits literally the next office over from
Mhm.
me when we're on the same campus. And we can both be there all day and we still may not see each other
Yeah,
because of
yeah,
whatever reason. And I think what you're saying is just so, just defines why we need a group like this. Like I
hmm,
don't have interaction with students unless I'm tasked to
true.
go do like the Lorraine, transfer fair because an admission counselor can't go. Sometimes I do that. Unless I'm doing something like that, I rarely have interactions with students anymore. Now I used to, so I have that background knowledge. But if I don't talk to somebody that has that knowledge from students and I'm out there making 2+2s or doing
Yeah,
new program, and students don't care about that major, or they need it to look like this, or this kind of tool would be better. I have to
sure.
have that input in order to do my job well.
Yeah,
Uh, the registrar's office, they love, I respect so much people in the registrar's office, but they do certain procedures and they are get so kind of in their mode of these procedures that sometimes it's hard for them to look at, well, is there a better way to do this or a different way we can do this that would be more student friendly? And so for them to hear that, I think is really
yeah,
beneficial too. And we just wouldn't have those conversations if we didn't have
yeah,
these meetings.
yeah,
It just wouldn't. And so I think it's, if for no other reason, being able just to get together and have those conversations, I think is so, so important.
yeah. And even it sounds like you guys do a good job, because what could happen in a group maybe like this is that if someone who, let's bring in the big title again, if someone comes in and has a high up title, they could dominate the group, and they could essentially have everyone there to voice opinions, but really are the ones making all the decisions. But it sounds like it's a two-way street with you guys quite a bit, where there's a lot of listening that goes back and forth, and the someone who has a higher up title might be able to take that to other people who are in the group of deans or whoever, to kind of say like, hey, this is what the staff is saying and this is their troubles and we could make a difference here, as opposed to, I very much could see it where I kind of alluded to it, but this is a group that is for venting, and I came in with a preconceived notion of this is what I wanted done, and I was coming to the group to task these groups with, like, hey, you guys can work on this. Hey, I need someone to do this, which I'm sure it could happen some, but it sounds like, there's a lot of, discussion back and forth and people are heard.
very, very much. And I would say Carolyn, as the true, I would consider her the true leader, even though we co-chair the group, does just as much work as the rest of us. And
Nice.
that exactly, that is the process. We identified a problem. I'll give you an example, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but we found out
Sure.
that classes were being equivalencies were being approved kind of on a one at a time basis through the departments. So
Yeah.
it's this will come in and it's like, yep, we approve it this time. And then we'll come in again. Yep, okay, we approve it this time. Instead of getting those into transferology, which is the system we use,
Yeah.
so that then they're approved for all students and all students can see that they're approved. It automatically updates on their records and all of that kind of stuff. And so we kind of didn't know that was happening until we had one of these discussions in this group. And then we were all like, that doesn't seem to be a very effective or efficient way to manage this process. Carolyn went, we proposed a new way to do it, that they would be ongoing instead of one set, one time only. Carolyn went to the council of chairs or whatever you call that, or council of deans, whatever,
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
high meeting that I wouldn't be invited to. And proposed it, and they were all like, oh yeah, I didn't know that was happening, you're right, this should be changed. They all supported the change, we made the change, and it's I feel so excited that this group was able to make what could be a really significant,
Sure.
change to the way we do things. And it seems so small. It's so easy. It's such a easy step for us to do. But until we got together and talked about it in this group, we would have never even known to address it.
Yeah.
And so it might just be little things if you get a group together. It might be a little thing. Another thing we're thinking about, we've talked about, is changing the way we kind of time out transfer orientation and the
Okay.
ways to register, and kind of looking at that process. And the regionals do it one way, Oxford does it one way. Is there a way to do that a little bit more the same? We've created training materials to give, like we use Canvas, like a Canvas site that has all kinds of information about ODHE initiatives, transferology, all of these different things that
Nice.
people who work with transfer students can use to access. We've come up with pathways. We had a tuition reciprocity thing that was happening that just really seemed to be ineffective and honestly unfair to transfer students. We were able to get that changed. And so I just feel like those things would just continue to go on until we have this group that gets together to question it. And I think it's one of the most impactful things that we do for transfer right now, is allow this group to get together. And like I said, we also do long-term things like a strategic plan, a transfer strategic plan. What does that look like? How do we tie in with the university goals so that we are really seen as part of the thread of what the university is doing, not just kind of a side thought, right?
Yeah.
What are our goals? What are our main initiatives? What's our mission of this group? And it lends credibility to what we're doing with transfer. It just, really gives such a strong foundation to what we're doing, I think. And it's just something that I think anybody can do. It's not one of those things that we're doing special. Like you said, you have something similar. Um, I was talking to somebody at another school recently, and they were like, I wish we had one of those. It would be easy. Like, even if you start small, start with a small group of people that are transfer champions. We
Hmm.
can usually identify the transfer champions on our colleges, our campuses.
Yep.
Start there and then go from there. I think
Yeah.
that's a step. Any step in the right direction is a step.
Sure. Yeah, I was gonna say one of my questions, as you know, I was gonna ask about like what's kind of the advice that you would give someone. So, you're at an institution, a group like this doesn't exist. You can see that there's transfer barriers, and you know that you need some assistance, or you think that you could be a part of something bigger in that regard. What, like, if you listen to this podcast and you think like that could make a lot of sense at my institution, maybe you have regional campuses, maybe you don't, maybe just a lot of your transfer services are siloed, like I was kind of talking about earlier. Other than starting small, like you just said, like what could be some other pieces of advice to someone that, might be looking to kind of do the same thing at their institution?
I think it's important to get the right people. Um, you know, really think about who rises to the occasion when you think about transfer at your institution? You know, who is always willing to have conversations with you? Who is willing to talk about articulation agreements? Think about those people when you think about a transfer champion at your institution. Who are those people? And reach out to them and say, I really value your opinion and your insight. I would also have a diversity in the group, right? So it would be really easy for me to have me and Gina, who you know, who's in transfer admissions, and Amanda, who works on down the hallway, and the people that I kind of work with most often. Like the people in the registrar's office, some of them I don't think I've ever even met in person in 14 years, and they've probably been here longer because we
Yeah.
just don't cross paths, right? So I think it's really important when you're building a group like this to have a good diversity of positions, advising, registrar, whoever does your, and I know it's different in different places who does what, but admissions, enrollment management. Um, so get the right people, the right diversity of populations, and make it really action oriented. I think it is so important after every meeting to have some kind of, okay, what are we going to do next? Whether that's create goals or follow up on a particular pathway, or I don't know what it might be, but small or large, have some kind of action. That's what I love about this. I hate meetings. Like they are literally the thing I hate the most about higher ed. In my opinion, we meet way too much about stuff. We just meet and meet and meet and meet. And this doesn't feel like that. This feels like, I almost want to call it a working group. That's what it is more like. We get together, we have a good agenda up front. So I think that's another thing, piece of advice I would give, maybe phrasing it differently, is don't waste people's time.
Yeah.
Like, don't want it to be, because then they won't want to be involved. We want to make it a real strong, action-oriented meeting where people feel like they are making a difference and that we are doing important work. And so, and I think that's what's really, really important. So however it really looks on your campuses, and you're right, I think the whole silo thing is the most important part of this, because we have some pretty strong silos, especially when you've got Oxford and you've got regionals, you've got Hamilton, you've got Middletown, you've got, all of these different places and people. So it really helps to break those down, I think. Um,
So really what I'm hearing is like equivalent to a montage in a movie of like I'm putting together a team or something like that. You got to think of everyone's expertise areas and who you think would fit well into the role, and maybe even be open to suggestions about, oh, this person really works a lot with transfer. You might not know them, but they seem perfect for a group like this. You're nodding, no one can see that, but
yes, sorry, 100%. That's how so we talked about Gina Walker, who I know, just to tell everybody, she's our relatively new senior admission counselor, and she works with transfer, right?
Mhm.
And she used to be on the group. And when she kind of moved into this position, she would come to me with these, she's got so many great ideas. And she is going to a lot of the transfer fairs, and she's hearing, what are students looking for? What kinds of like partnerships should we be trying to build? What are some of their
Mhm.
why are they not transferring to Miami, let's say? She's getting that information firsthand. That's important stuff. So yes, I recommended that we add her to the collaborative. So there
Mhm.
is a lot of that,
Nice.
um, networking kind of thing, where somebody would say, I think this person would be really good on this group.
Yep.
Um, and so that's been very, very important, because of the silos, you don't always know who the transfer champions are
Yep.
everywhere.
Yep.
But yeah,
I, s-
it's been great.
I see Gina on the road. She's very nice and friendly, and I'm sure she's a great addition to your group. So that's nice to hear that you're still adding, even though it might feel concrete. Sometimes you can kind of expand that village that we keep talking about.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So maybe real quick, what are some things that you would like to see maybe still out of the group? Obviously, no one can predict the future and what happens in 2 years in higher education or Ohio or Southwest Ohio or whatever. You're not going to be able to predict stuff like that. But is there something maybe looming that you wish like the group could tackle, or is there maybe a piece of transfer that you see that the group, it's kind of hard to change, and maybe you'd like to see some progress on something like that.
Yeah. And if anybody from my school is listening to this, they're going to roll their eyes, but we need better, more coordinated infrastructure for transfer and like a transfer center. Right now, we've got all of these silos, and the transfer collaborative to me is like a blueprint for a little transfer center, right? We've got representatives from admission, advising, enrollments, we've got those people, transcript evaluators. If we could, instead of having them so spread out, if we could bring them together in a way that provides a more coordinated experience for transfer students, I just think we'd be so much more successful. And so I'd really love to see this group, build a proposal and really advocate for that kind of system, or I don't know what you want to call it, but that kind of opportunity. And again, I really see this group, when you think about who makes up the group, how it works together to change policies and serve students and build partnerships. It's like that's exactly what I think a transfer center would do and what it would look like. So how can we take this transfer collaborative, this group that meets once a month, and expand it to be something that
Yeah.
would really have impact outside of those monthly meetings to like students and the community and our partners and all of those things. That's kind of a pipe dream. For now, I'm happy to have the group, but I would love to see that happen. Um, and I would, like I said before, this is another kind of, it's hard to get trained, in my opinion. And if people listening have some great advice, please email me. It's hard to get transfer students sometimes to engage in things, events,
Sure.
or that kind of thing. And so I would love to be able to find a transfer student or two to be more involved in the collaborative. If we had a transfer center, to be like an ambassador for a transfer center like that. Um, that's another thing I really struggle with that I think could be a big, I don't want to call it a task, but a challenge of the transfer collaborative. How do we get students to be more involved? Um, Not just in our group, but in all of our efforts. So those are kind of things that I really kind of my pipe dreams down the road, because I think we're doing a lot of other things really well. I think we're meeting the ODHE requirements really well. I think we're looking at policies really well. I think we're building our transfer, like our, I hate to call them 2+2s, but our articulations and pathways really well. Um, but now I just would like to see it more as part of the infrastructure of the university, I
Yeah.
think.
No, that's I think a good, maybe last major point. Especially because we think about a group like this, and you can't solve every single thing, or you can't improve every single thing all the time, right? You have to delegate tasks, you have to try to coordinate and be systematic with all of this, which is why hearing that you're putting together like a strategic plan and all of that things, like obviously administration really likes that, but even just as like a something to keep everyone on topic and on what am I trying to say? Like when keeping people working on things towards the larger goal. Not everything's going to obviously be solved overnight, and new things emerge. So it's great that you guys are thinking ahead and also knocking things out kind of at the same time. So I guess just, is there anything else that you would want to add? Just for the group, is there anything that you think I forgot that would be nice for people to know?
No, I mean, I hope this was helpful to people. They can always reach out to me if they have any questions. I'm not an expert by any means, but I'm always happy to share my experience. I think this is just something that feels small, doesn't cost money, and really can have a strong impact. I really believe that it can have a really strong impact on whatever efforts people are doing at their universities, their colleges, their campuses as it relates to transfer. And so, yeah, I hope it's helpful, and I'm here if anybody wants to talk about it more.
Thanks for saying that. And it was helpful. And you don't have to be an expert, you're a practitioner. So it's always just nice to hear people's viewpoints, the cool things that they're doing. So I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast and taking the time. I know that, OTCs and your boss, Amanda, recommended this to be an episode, and I thought it was a great idea, obviously, and you've been wonderful to talk with. As everyone is listening to the podcast and such, we know that the conference is coming up here in June. So early bird registration for that ends on April 22nd. So if you have not registered yet, or if you've been waiting to get things approved at work or whatever, just keep that date in mind. The price is $135 for the day. That includes breakfast, lunch, and it includes the social the night before. So definitely that's a great price for all of that. After April 22nd, that price jumps up to $165. So not the biggest jump in the world, but still, if you want to save the $30, please get registered soon. You can find information of that. You can find information about that. I'm having like eclipse brain right now. It's coming up and I'm just kind of fried, right? But information for that is on the OTC website. So we hope to see you there. Thank you again, Cathy. And we are signing off for the day. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.